necessary feedback, which is a critical component to this process. Welcome everyone, and it is my honor to introduce you all to my supervisor, Supervisor Donatoli.
Well, thank you, Mayor Bobby Singh Allen. We really appreciate the City of Elk Grove hosting us in your council chambers here this evening, and thank you for your leadership and that of your council and certainly of your city staff. I want to just take a brief moment first to thank Courtney Bailey-Canales for her good work as our Chief Registrar for Elections and Voter Registration, and her staff. Obviously, they've headed up this along with our consultants, this effort, but in between all that, they oversee elections, which the cycles seem to never end in this day and age, but we certainly thank Courtney and her staff for all their good work. This is the last of several workshops that have been held out in the respective supervisorial districts, and this is the second one in District 5. We had one just a little more than a month ago out in the Rancho Cordova, Rosemont, Butterfield Riviera area and in the Highway 50 corridor, and this is the second one. And as Mayor Singh Allen said, District 5 is very big geographically. It's grown significantly over the last 10 years, and about 40,000, almost 40,000 people by the estimated population, and we'll have those numbers with certainty here in the next few weeks. I do also want to thank all of our technical staff. I know we have Rami Zakaria and David Villanueva from our information technology and internal services, and we have a number of other lead staff, and certainly all the technicians and audiovisual folks that have helped put these broadcasts together, because as Mayor Singh Allen said, the engagement, your attendance here this evening, you can participate via Zoom, via other mediums to be a part of this, and the takeaway is that it's very important as we go in to the formalities of the redistricting decision-making over the next few weeks to certainly have had a broad outreach and good public engagement. And I know we have folks in the audience who, some who've attended, I think, all of these hearings in the various supervisorial districts, and want to thank you all who are in attendance this evening. So with that being said, certainly look forward to the comments and information that's not only presented, but also the feedback from folks here this evening. There are a myriad of ways in which you can follow on to the discussion and be a part of that, and both Courtney and Doug will go through that in a moment. But again, thank you, Mayor Singh Allen, and certainly the City of Elk Grove for hosting this evening's redistricting workshop. Courtney, back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Supervisor, and thank you, Mayor. We are very excited to be here for sure. So I'm going to make a few announcements on kind of how this meeting is going to go tonight, and also to highlight how the audience can participate, because we are kind of doing a unique thing here by being able to participate in person, virtually, and over the phone. So a lot of ways to participate. The county is hosting this in-person virtual workshop to provide an overview of the redistricting process and give a demonstration on the mapping tools available for community input. Public input is vital to a successful redistricting project, so we want to make sure we allow plenty of time to ask questions and provide feedback. National Demographics Corporation, with Doug, will give a presentation for about 15 minutes, and then we will open it up for public comments. Community members can make a comment in person, by phone, or submit comments through the Zoom Q&A feature. It is important to note that any phone comments, questions, or comments submitted through Zoom will become part of the official public record and posted to our redistricting website. We will start with in-person comments first, then move to the phone line, and then the Zoom Q&A feature. We will circle through until there are no more public comments or questions. To make a public comment by phone during tonight's presentation, please dial 916-875-2500 and choose option number 1 and follow the prompts to be placed in the queue. You may be on hold for up to an extended period of time, and your patience is appreciated. I will ask staff to transfer each caller into the workshop, and the caller will have an opportunity to provide input, either ask questions, comments, or provide public testimony. The chat feature in Zoom will not be available, but participants can submit questions or comments through the Zoom Q&A feature, and I will read those questions out loud. Language interpretation services are available for all languages. Please call the public comment phone line at 916-875-2500, and staff will connect you with the language interpreter. You and the language interpreter will be transferred into the workshop to make additional comments. There will also be an American Sign Language interpreter on your screen. Time limits for public comments may be imposed if we have a large number of participants. Thank you in advance for your courtesy and understanding, as it is our goal to give everyone an opportunity to provide input on this very important process. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please send a text or call the clerk's office for assistance at 916-599-0112. You can also send an email to boardclerk@saccounty.net, and staff will connect you to provide assistance. If after the workshop you still want to make a public comment, we encourage that. Please submit any comments you have to redistricting@saccounty.net. And alternatively, you can also mail comments to 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814, and attention Clerk of the Board. All public comments will be evaluated during this redistricting process. So thank you for your participation as we get going in our very last workshop before our official hearings. So let's go ahead and talk about what is redistricting, Doug? Why should we care?
Thank you, Courtney. My name is Doug Yoakum. I'm with National Demographics Corporation. We have been hired by the county to assist the supervisors and the residents of Sacramento to draw the 5 supervisor districts, redraw the 5 supervisor districts as required by state and federal law every 10 years. I will start by showing everybody what our schedule is going to be. Hopefully it'll come up here. There we go. We're already substantially through a major part of it. Started back in May, had our first hearing back in June, and we had 2 virtual hearings also in June. And we are in the process of having a community workshop in each district, supervisor district in the county. We've had 2 here in the District 5 because of as the supervisor said, the nature of it, the large nature of it. Had 1 in Rancho, and tonight is the last of the 6 workshops we're planning to have here in Elk Grove. We had our August hearing, just to brief the supervisors on how this process is going to go. And then on August 16th, the Census Bureau officially released its data, but it was not readable by humans. It was only readable by computers. So the next month was taken by the statewide database, which is an entity of the state legislature, to manipulate that data and conform it to how state law requires the data to be submitted to the state redistricting commission and to every city and county in California as the official data that is required to be used for redistricting in all of these jurisdictions. And that was now officially released on the 20th of September, and it was revised on the 27th of September. So we all now have official data, and the county of Sacramento and every other county in the state will have, that we are helping at National Demographics, will have updated mapping tools that I'll tell you about in a minute, very soon. We've established October 15th as a soft deadline for members of the public to draft maps using the tools that we'll describe in a minute. And then on November 2nd, we'll have another board hearing to officially talk about maps we have seen and perhaps some that we have drafted for the consideration of the supervisors. Then 2 weeks later, we'll have another board hearing, hopefully have some more input from the public as to how they want to see districts drawn. And November 17th is the final hearing that we'll have, and that hopefully that will be the day that we actually adopt a map for the County of Sacramento, because December 15th is the deadline that all counties in California must complete this process by state law. Here are the redistricting rules and goals and the laws that we are required to follow. I'll start with the federal laws. Districts must be, as the mayor just told us, substantially equal. Each one has to be pretty much equal to the other, so that each district, all the citizens in each district are represented equally in front of the Board of Supervisors. 10 years from now, after more changes in population will have occurred, each county will be required to do this again, as is the state and cities and everyone else that draws districts. So this is a process that happens every 10 years. We must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and that means that when drawing districts, we cannot discriminate against a protected class of voters by combining them or splitting them in a way that deprives them of their opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice in a district. And that basically means no racial gerrymandering. We cannot, as a county, sit down and start our process by saying, okay, we're going to draw this kind of a district or that kind of a district. We have to draw districts based on population, and we have to make sure that we don't discriminate against a community of protected class voters as we go along. So that's something that we absolutely must do. Then 2 years ago, the state passed a law called the Fair Maps Act, and they set down some requirements that each district must meet, and they're in numerical order here by their importance. First, of course, was equal population. That is requirement of all districts. And the state requires that each district be geographically contiguous, meaning that it has to be one part of the district has to be connected to the other part. You can't have two separate parts of districts. That's not legal. To the extent possible, we are to identify and then not divide neighborhoods or communities of interest that are identified either by the supervisors or by citizens themselves when they comment to the supervisors and say, here is my neighborhood, or here is our community of interest. To the extent possible, we are required to keep those entities, those neighborhoods and communities together. In county redistricting, we are required to keep incorporated cities and census-designated places, CDPs, together to the extent possible. Elk Grove is a city. Citrus Heights is a city. To the extent possible, when we draw lines, we draw new districts, we're supposed to keep those communities together. Wilton is a census-designated place, and it has boundaries that you can see on a map, and the Census Bureau has identified those boundaries. And so when you're drawing maps, you're supposed to keep places like that together as well as incorporated cities. We will be, to the extent possible, using easily identifiable boundaries. And that means major streets, freeways, natural borders such as rivers, creeks, railroad tracks. This is so a resident can easily identify where their district lies and whether they're inside or outside of it. So we don't want to have a squiggly line going through neighborhoods that it makes it hard for people to figure out what district they're in. If we can use easily identifiable boundaries, we are going to do so. And the final requirement of the Fair Map Act is to keep districts compact. And the only definition that the Act provides is that we may not bypass one group of people in order to get to another one. Example would be, going around the city of Rancho Cordova and grabbing something to the east of it, while still having something in the west on the west side of it, but ignoring the city of Rancho Cordova or something. That's what we're not supposed to do. They're supposed to be compact. There is only one specific prohibition in the Fair Maps Act, and that says we cannot draw districts that favor or discriminate against a political party. So there are other redistricting principles that are often mentioned, and they are not prohibited by the Act, and they're not required. So they are discretionary for the supervisors to either use or ignore at their pleasure. One is to minimize the number of voters shifted between different election years. As you may know, supervisors are elected for 4-year terms. So when you do redistricting, you may have to look at a community that was in that's going to have an election in 2022, and you may have to move it into a district that has an election in 2024 instead. To the extent possible, we want to avoid that, because that's depriving some folks of their ability to elect a supervisor on their scheduled election year. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if we can avoid that as much as possible. Respect voters' choices as to continuity in office, and that simply means that you don't want to, on purpose, put one supervisor in the same district as another one. That just causes one of them to lose their seats, and it's not something that you want to do on purpose. So we will, to the extent that we can, avoid that. There's also, you can take into consideration future population growth. You can underpopulate a district that has what you expect to be a lot of growth in it, that you expect over the next 10 years, but that would obviously require another district to have more people in it. So you don't want to go too far afield on that, and because there is a requirement that the districts be equal, substantially equal to each other. And so the percentage that you deviate from one to another, you want to limit that so that you can say that the districts that you've drawn are equal population and represent each community to the extent possible equally. And another principle that's often used is simply preserve the core of the existing districts. And that's something I think we can illustrate right here, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we're going to go through neighborhoods first. What is your neighborhood? We encourage folks to comment either here or online about what their neighborhood is, what they consider their neighborhood to be, and what its boundaries are. So that tell us what your natural dividing lines are, whether it's around a park or a school, what streets are within that your neighborhood, and tell us why your neighborhood is important and why it's important to be kept together. And there's also communities of interest, which are somewhat different in that the people in this community of interest, have shared social or economic issues, such as traffic or law enforcement. And they wish to be kept together in order to be properly represented, their issue to be properly represented in front of the Board of Supervisors. So we also encourage folks to tell us those kind of stories about what your community and community of interest is like, and why you think it should be kept together, or if you think it should be divided, so that you have it not influenced in just one supervisor district, but perhaps in more than one. There's one thing that communities of interest are not, and that is they cannot include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. That's not a community of interest. Is this where we do the video?
No, I think we go to the community of interest
okay.
form
Community of interest form first.
Yeah. So I think we'll go ahead and pull up the community of interest form. Oh, this might have been the,
Yeah, this is a different presentation.
okay.
Here we go.
All right, so
let me describe the community of interest form, and Courtney's going to do that for us.
So, so as we learned that this redistricting process for Sacramento County is a board-managed process, meaning our Board of Supervisors end up making the final decisions regarding the boundaries. But in order for them to successfully make those decisions, we really need to hear from the community. And we're going to be highlighting some mapping tool options, but there's also this great option that we have for neighborhoods and communities to tell us more about their community of interest. So this form here kind of prompts you to think about what your community is, why it's important, why we should make sure that we look at that community when we're making decisions regarding the district lines. So this form is available on our website at redistricting2021.saccounty.net. And if we scroll down, so the first page just gives some general information, and on the second page is where people can actually fill this form out to tell us more about their community. You can fill out as much or as little information as you would like, and we really want to use this opportunity to hear from you. It is important to note that this is part of the official public record, so don't end up entering anything too personal. You probably want to leave your actual address out of it. But the first area says, I'd like to keep my community together, and it gives some examples on what we can use when we think about our communities. Where we go to school, what services we have in common, housing we have in common, any social and civic networks, where we go to church, where all of our kids go to schools, neighborhood association, parks, any sort of environmental conditions or factors, public transportation use. All of those can be used to help identify a community of interest. And we use the term community of interest pretty broad. And so if you're even unsure if something is defined as a community of interest and you're not sure, that's okay. Tell us anyways, and we want to look at it. Because really, we're just looking largely on what you think your community is. You can also use physical boundaries. Things like parks, rivers, highways, any historic sites. Maybe if you can just give us the geographical boundaries, that's really helpful as well. You can also share how your community is similar to the following neighborhoods, or even different than the following neighborhoods. And I know through these, these meetings so far, I've learned a lot about similarities between the Fair Oaks and Gold River communities. I've also learned a lot about Old Land Park versus Southland Park communities. So always learning from these workshops. So you can definitely share how you're similar or how you're different as well. And then at the bottom, there is a place for you to put any common histories you might have. You might have some information on how the neighborhoods were formed or what binds them together. Maybe it used to be, an old job or old factory that kind of combined or grouped a community together. We want to know all of that. Now, our supervisors are pretty amazing, and they know a lot of history about our communities, but this also helps to make sure that we are looking at all possible communities, especially as we know with the newest census that there have been changes. So you can submit this form to redistricting@saccounty.net, but you don't have to use this form. You can also email, and then we also will have some mapping tools as well. So it is important to note that what the county is doing is specific for Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. But when you're talking about your community of interest, it's your community of interest no matter what redistricting effort is going on. So you will notice that there's a lot of different redistricting efforts happening with different cities, school districts, local districts, also on the state level with assembly districts, congressional districts, and Senate districts. Please note that whatever you submit for Sacramento County, or if you've already submitted community of interest testimony for another redistricting effort, we would love to just have what you've already submitted come right to us, or you can submit what you're going to submit for Sacramento County, even on the state level. So with the state level, we have the We Draw the Line, ca.org, and then also keep a lookout for your local cities and the redistricting efforts that they are going to undertake as well. Redistricting criteria and rules do change depending on the jurisdiction and the timing that those jurisdictions go to election. So it's really important to keep an eye out on what the rules are for that particular district and then the timing as well. But lucky for us, we still got time to get in a lot of this community of interest testimony. So this form is definitely an option. We also have some mapping tools that are pretty fun and creative on a way to submit it online or even with paper maps. So we'll see how to do that.
How to submit maps for redistricting. There is a map submission tool for every level of experience and interest, from simple paper maps that you just draw on to complex technical maps with lots of data layers and online submission. Let's discuss which tools are right for you. Step 1. Get informed. Learn more about your district, neighborhood, or community of interest. Resources are available to you in easy-to-read informational maps. They provide population, demographic, and geographical information by using estimated 2020 census data. The story map includes a wide array of geographic and demographic data arranged like a PowerPoint presentation. These simple maps are interactive as you step your way through them to see details about districts and tracts. They can be a great reference for you when you tell your community story to the county. As public map submissions become available, they will be added to the story map as well. The interactive review map is a powerful tool, packed full of layered data such as population, demographics, citizen voting age, and various council and service plan boundaries. Once the redistricting draft maps are ready for release in November of 2021, they'll be added as layers to this tool as well. Step 2. Draw a map. After learning more about the tools and resources available to you, choose a mapping tool and method that works best for you. Simple paper maps are available in 2 formats: estimated population data and city, freeways, and census-designated places data. These simple one-page printable maps can be drawn on and notated, then submitted to the county for consideration. There is also a Microsoft Excel supplemental file available to help calculate the populations if you prefer. Powerful online mapping tools provide greater detail and more layers and features when drawing your districts, neighborhoods, and communities of interest. These tools allow users to save and submit their maps to the county online. The District R online mapping tool is a simple online paintbrush tool that allows you to paint your neighborhood, your community of interest, or a full countywide district map. You can select areas to include in your map, erase unwanted areas, mark important places and landmarks, and add comments to describe your map. The most powerful mapping tool is the Caliper Maptitude online tool. This tool enables you to draw districts by census block with all the demographic data used by the county's demographic consultants. You can fine-tune your district lines and see, in detail, the resulting demographics as you draw your map. This tool requires users to create a free online account. You can use the tool to edit existing district boundaries or draw entirely new ones. The tool provides population counts and demographics of the districts you draw to show the impacts of moving the lines. You can see in real time how your proposed map lines would impact districts. The county redistricting website has some short user training videos that explain the features and steps needed to create, save, and submit your maps. We encourage you to review them. Step 3, submit your map. If you chose an online option, then you can simply submit through the online tool. Or, if you prefer, you may also print and send to the county by email, mail, or drop it off in person. If you chose the paper-only option, you have the same options to email, mail, or drop off in person. For email, please send to redistricting@saccounty.net. To submit by mail or to drop it off in person, please send to Clerk of the Board, Attention, Redistricting, 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814. Please note that all submissions are part of the public record and will be posted in their entirety to the Public Comments webpage. For more information on the redistricting process and what you can do to participate, please visit the website redistricting2021.saccounty.net.
Awesome. Those are some pretty cool tools, a lot of different options to be able to submit some proposed boundaries, your community of interest, so a lot of different ways to get involved. That's really exciting.
Courtney, can I just ask you,
yeah.
just to make sure folks know, it showed up a bit in some of the descriptive materials there, but this is available in a variety of languages, correct? Maybe you could just point that out. There's, in addition to all the ways you can respond, again, depending upon what language may be your primary, we have a number of tools available that can be applicable in those languages. Is that correct?
That's a great point to make. Yes, on our website on redistricting2021.saccounty.net, we have our community of interest testimony forms, we have redistricting information, we have even paper maps translated in 10 different languages. And if you go on there and you see something that is not translated or not translated in a language you need, let us know and we'd be happy to take care of that. So a lot of different options there, and it should also be noted that there is no restriction for submitting your community of interest testimony, meaning you don't even have to be a citizen and you don't even have to be 18. So maybe you have someone, a neighbor that really knows your community and knows some history well. Or maybe we have, like right now, we have our high school intern Oliver in, and maybe he has a great grasp on his surrounding community. So no restrictions. We want to hear from you all. So thank you, Supervisor. I'm glad you mentioned that. And actually, before we get to the public comments and questions, Doug, can you talk a little bit about, with the mapping tools now, we know that, okay, data is out. The mapping tools right now still have the old estimated data. So how do we move forward? When are we going to get the new data in the mapping tools? And what should folks do when that time comes?
As I mentioned, the statewide database has released their official data. Our company is now putting together all of the tools that all of our clients are going to need and use over the next couple months to help draw districts. We're prioritizing the counties first because the counties have a December 15th deadline. So that will, in the next week to 10 days, we will have new, the same redistricting tools, but there will be new data associated with them on Sacramento County website here. The data will be different because we've been using estimated data up to this point. But all of the maps and suggestions that have been made using that old data will be preserved. And we encourage folks to go back and look at the new data and draw either neighborhoods or districts to their heart content based on what is the actual data that we will be using to draw the final maps.
And Doug, that's a good point too, is that you're not limited to just one entry. You can submit multiple communities of interest. You can submit them as a group or as a neighborhood or as a business, or you can submit them individually. So there is no cap. And we, again, because maybe you have a different community of interest where your business is versus where you live or where your kids go to school. So all of that will help in making the decisions the difficult decisions that the Board of Supervisors are going to have to make. So before we go to public comment, Supervisor or Mayor, anything to add or ask at this time?
You know, I asked this question of Doug earlier, but I think it bears worth repeating, and that is, how often do these boundaries change? How much can we expect of those shifts, knowing that we've obviously grown in our population and there are less numbers in District 3 and 4, so where do you see those shifts taking place?
Yeah, we're sitting in South County in the city of Elk Grove right now, which is it has been a growing community over the last 10 years. And as a result of that, Supervisor Natoli's district, District 5, is overpopulated. It has too many people that it has more people than would be an equal population based on 5 districts in the county. So the county's going to have to redraw the districts based on what districts need added populations, and those are the districts basically on the north side of the county, and the district on the south side of the county is probably going to be contributing to other districts so that they can come up to their equal population number. So that's generally how it's going to work. I don't want to be too specific because we haven't really drawn any maps yet, and we'd love to hear from folks in the community as to how they think these districts should be drawn. And if you go on the website now and look at the District R tool, there are some maps that some members of the community have drawn already, and those will be taken into consideration as we start the process.
Great, thank you.
If I could, Courtney, just, I think to kind of emphasize the point, both to Mayor St. Allen's question and Doug's response, that unique to District 5 is that it touches all 4 districts, all the other 4 remaining supervisors' districts. And so I think the considerations for adjustments and population, but certainly as you look at communities of interest, incorporated boundaries, and other neighborhoods and so forth. Again, it certainly presents the challenge of how you adjust that to fit the requirements under the law, but also provides the opportunity with the interface with the other 4 districts and you know, and all the various attributes, certainly of District 5, but certainly of the other districts as well, and trying with the alignments that'll be proposed. So I just wanted to ask Doug, on the website, I haven't accessed that, probably no surprise to anybody, but wanted to ask, how many submittals as of this afternoon relative to folks that have either suggested maps or maybe comments? We certainly want to encourage that participation. It is key, I think, to discussion that the board's going to have with the community in the weeks ahead. So I'm just curious some of the early entries.
Well, I'll describe them as I look at them here. There are, this is only on the District R website. No one has so far used the Caliper tool to draw any districts yet. But if you look at the District R under Public Gallery on the Sac County website, you'll see that there are 2 full plans that have been drawn, all 5 districts. There's some suggestions as to what the historic Rancho Cordova area was, something called a logical Rancho Cordova boundary. So that's someone's opinion of what is Rancho Cordova. There's a comment about what is West Arcade, Arden Arcade. And there's some drawings of the Antelope area that folks have suggested, okay, that simply tell us what they consider the Antelope area to be, which is a census designated place in the northern part of the county, and a suggestion as to what the Tahoe Park neighborhood is.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I'm not surprised the submissions are through District R, because that is a great tool. It's actually fun to use. It's user-friendly, so that's my favorite tool.
It's very interesting to use, and I will be here at the end of this workshop to we have some computers set up over here. I can actually show you how all of these tools work if you desire.
Yeah, so for any in-person attendees, we do have some laptops set up for the tools. We also have the video tutorials online, which so far I've heard been very helpful. So check those out if you want to look at it at home. Again, no cap on submissions, but we are encouraging folks to get as much information to us as possible by October 15th so that our demographers can get some draft maps drawn to propose to our Board of Supervisors in November. And the official hearing dates and times are on our website for November, so you're definitely going to want to watch those hearings and provide public comment closely during that time as well.
I have an intellectual curiosity question.
Ooh.
So I'm looking at the map and I see Gold River as this little patch of pink. The outreach there, has the community responded in terms of whether they really identify as part of District 4, 3, or perhaps even 5?
There were a couple of public testimony folks at the Fair Oaks District 3 workshop. They thought that Gold River goes with Rancho with Fair Oaks. Mm-hmm. We had some comments at the Rancho Cordova meeting that they thought Gold River was perhaps could be combined with Rancho Cordova. So there are different opinions all over the county about what should or shouldn't be done. And we'll have to take all of that into consideration.
If I could, if anyone was interested, you could go back historically back to 2011, and the board hearings are archived, and you can see some of the conversations around that. The District 4 supervisor at the time resided in the Gold River community, and there was quite a discussion about what had, at that time, prior to the 2011 redistricting, comprised District 4, and then what resulted, obviously, as a result of the discussions and the deliberations before the Board of Supervisors. But I think there's some history there. It's an interesting question, and appreciate Doug sharing some of the more current comments. But you can actually go back any number of decades and see District 5 has been the largest geographically, historically, at least over the last probably 50 years. But the population growth has been predominantly in that district, but not solely. There's other areas that have grown as well. But and I could just tell you with certainty that over the course of my time with the county, District 5, when I first came to the county, included Fair Oaks and Folsom. Obviously, where we sit here this evening was still yet undeveloped farmland and rural home sites. And over the years, though, the Vineyard community and certainly areas in the north and the city of Sacramento and some of our newer cities, including Elk Grove, have grown significantly. So it has shrunk geographically over time, but still remains the largest geographically, and certainly contains a substantial portion of the rural portions of the county as well, so including the Delta.
That's great historical perspective because, yeah, a lot of the decisions that were made at the time were based on that, and even including where the incumbents, as Supervisor Natoli mentioned, were, where they were seating. And it's important to note that there are some redistricting efforts taking place where you can't consider an incumbent's current residence, but that is not a prohibition under the Fair Maps Act or for Sacramento County. But if you have thoughts on that, of course, we would want to hear it. We also, on our website, on our homepage at redistricting2021.saccounty.net, if you scroll down to the bottom, we have old supervisor maps that go back to the 1960s. So it's really good to see kind of that change over time. And then, something just real quickly to bring up, Doug, before we get to public comments, and I know we have some here, and I appreciate everyone's patience, but at the Supervisor 1 workshop we had with Supervisor Cerna, there was talk about, which is true from a lot of our supervisors that have worked with communities over many years. They work on projects together, and some might want to say, listen, I've been working with Supervisor Natoli on this for the past 5 years, so I want to kind of consider that as my community of interest. Now, I saw on the slides that it says you really can't look at relationships to the incumbents as part of your criteria. But, I mean, can we kind of open it up to say if someone is working on a project, whether it's with any of the supervisors, I mean, is that something that we can take into consideration as long as it's not a specific tie to the incumbent?
Yes, as I mentioned, a community of interest can be defined as an issue or a socioeconomic characteristic. If you have a Russian community that you can draw lines around, or any other ethnic community, that can be considered a community of interest. Or if you're a neighborhood that has been working on a traffic issue on Jackson Highway or something, and you want to be considered as part of as part of an entity together, so that you can influence the supervisor singularly on that issue, then tell us what your community is, what that issue might be, so that we can consider keeping it together within a supervisor district, whether you want it to be in District 4 or District 5 or District 3, whatever your preference is. You are free to tell us what you think where you think your community should be in the districting. So that's what this is all about.
So you got to follow, of course, the federal laws first and the equal population. Then we have the Fair Maps Act. Then some of those other things we can take into consideration after we meet those required federal and state laws.
That's correct. And it's important to look at the Fair Maps Act criteria and remember that they are in priority order. So compactness is the least important one, and contiguity is the most important one.
Yeah.
If I could, just to piggyback on what Doug said, and I think you alluded to it earlier, Courtney or Doug, in your comments, but a community of interest can be a business district. It can be, we have, business districts both in the incorporated and unincorporated areas, and so that, or an industrial complex of some sort. So there are different ways to characterize that.
Mr. Cerna had a very good example of it, the Florin district,
yes.
the Florin community.
Right.
Which happens to be divided by 3 supervisor districts right now. So Mr. Cerna said that they actually enjoy having 3 supervisors listen to them. So if they want to be united in one, that's great. But if they want to continue to be divided, please tell us that too.
Great point. Great point. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so let's get to the public comments, the main reason why we're here. So we're going to go ahead and open it to in-person comments first. If anyone would like to come up to the podium to either ask a question, make comments, you can even use this opportunity to provide testimony on your community of interest. So if anyone would like to come up to the podium. Don't rush all at once. Okay, no. Understand, and that's okay. We'll go ahead and, oh, do we have, oh, yes, wonderful. Come on up, sir.
Right here?
Right there's perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, 2 things. Number one is I was with Supervisor Kennedy, and the question I had is about rural areas. So my district is District 5, obviously, and is the Vineyard. It's a noted community, and it's also very rural. So I think it should be, more in the District 5, as that's what's aligned with the rest of District 5. And then the other one is a question is, it's a great medium to receive data and collect data, but how is the data actually being utilized? How is the data compiled and read? And what's actually happening with it? I understand there's like a million ways to enter the data and give data, but what's actually happening with the data? And I guess that's what would help me, entice me to actually submit data, right? So,
Great question. Yeah.
W-
So Doug, how are you gonna
Without
compile
getting
this?
too deep in the weeds, like I said, Census Bureau releases what's the results of the census, and that's basically a count of all the people living in a certain area all over the country. And they have, then there's other data that the Census Bureau has been compiling over the last 10 years. It's called community ACS, American Community Survey data, that has ethnicity involved with it, that we combine that data with the census data, so that we can make distinctions as to how many voters, potential voters there are in each district, people who are eligible to vote. That's the reason we have that data is for Voting Rights Act analysis. But what we don't have is voter registration data. Republican, Democrat, declined to, I'm sorry, what is it?
No party preference.
No party preference. We don't have that data. That's not on this website, and you won't see it in any redistricting, local redistricting in the state. But we use the census data as a base, and they have the geography already associated with it. So if you'll let me show you, I can show you how we draw a district using either blocks or tracks or whatever you prefer to use to combine together to put a district together. So it's population data and ethnic data, and we also have from the American Community Survey other kinds of demographic data that you can look at on the website.
And then Doug, how are you with the public testimony we get with the communities of interest and the mapping tools you get? How are you going to kind of combine those and present them to the board in order for the board to make decisions on some draft maps?
It depends on what kind of input we receive from the communities. But what I'm supposed to do, what I'm in charge of doing is consolidating those comments, all of the comments, hopefully putting them together, those that are similar together, and then presenting that viewpoint. And then if there are different viewpoints, I would obviously present that as well. And then based on what folks are saying we should be here, here, or here, I can draw a draft map that says we put this community here and this community there as they desired, or I had to go against the recommendation of this particular community because we needed it for a population addition to this district, whatever. There's all sorts of combinations you can do in redistricting. You can start at one corner and you'll get a different result than what you do if you start in another corner of the county. So it's interesting to do, but what I'm in charge of doing is consolidating the comments so that they're understandable, and I can convey them to the supervisors, and they can make their decision as to what districts they want to draw, because I'm not the person who makes the decision. It's the members of the Board of Supervisors who are in charge of actually making a decision as to what map is going to be adopted.
So you have the task of just kind of summarizing them all together, things that are similar or not, but then making sure that the board is briefed and knows what the comments were from the public.
Right, and we must, our plan and our requirement is to do that in public.
Yep. Could I just follow on to that? So the comment, his first comment went to the rural nature of at least where he resides, and I took it, at least, and again, you'll digest all this, but that, he wanted rural areas to, be similarly located. And that's the type of input where, again, community of interest, that then you would factor in. Also, I think recognizing that populations in rural areas are, significantly less than, some of the metropolitan suburban growing areas and some of the urban settings. And so that, that becomes, I guess, part of the challenge that the demographer has in trying to meet all the other criteria. But so the comments that are made either at the podium this evening and or through any other mediums, that's all going to get filtered into what you said, Doug, and including what the gentleman just said. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And I remember that was our first meeting, and that was interesting to see about, you're like, I live in Vineyard, but then the schools all go down into Elk Grove. So that was really interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Any other in-person comments at this time? No? Then, okay, we'll go ahead and move to the phone lines. If someone wants to make a comment by phone, it's 916-875-2500, and choose option 1 to be placed in the queue. So I'm going to check with our wonderful clerk of the board's office and see if we have anyone on the phone line.
Yes, this is Darrell with the clerk of the board, and we currently have 2 callers in our queue. and I have the first one ready to make their public comment. Are you ready for that now?
Great. Yes, please go ahead and transfer the caller in. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, caller, please go ahead and make your public comment.
Hi, I had a question. Can you give a more clear explanation on what property-based improvement districts are and how we'll be affected by redistricting?
Okay, so
I didn't quite hear. Could you say that again?
I'm sorry, she disconnected the call.
that's okay. I think it was how property-based improvement district or PBIDs, how they can participate in redistricting that way and how it will affect them.
You can tell us what the boundaries of your PBID is, and you can tell us if you think that the way you are currently drawn into the county's redistricting plan is adequate for your use, or is something that you would like changed. That's the kind of input we're looking for. I think I have access to a database that shows what PBID's boundaries are, but it would be very helpful for you at the PBID to tell us what the boundaries are, and then we can take that in consideration as to what district it stays in or goes into.
Great. That was a great question. Thank you. Okay, we can go ahead and send in the next caller.
Hello, caller, please go ahead and make your public comment.
Hi, yeah, I'm here in the Elk Grove area, and this might take a minute. Basically, I know you've been talking about keeping communities of interest together, but there was also a mention of making sure that this process is free from like special interest and political influences, and I feel like there's overlap there. And then even more with, you talked a little bit about racial discrimination. I just feel like how can you say that, oh, we want to keep this community of interest together while knowing that that might affect like special interest or like political influence?
Good question.
I'll answer that question the best that I can. It's a complicated question. Let me take an Elk Grove example, and pretend it's like a county. Let's say that you're interested in where a hospital might be located, and your community is opposed to that hospital. You can go online and show us what that community, what the boundaries of what you think the folks who have that community of interest together and are united in their opinion of that, and then you can say, here's the community, let's say Laguna West, that is interested in that issue, and then say we would like the community of Laguna West to be included entirely within the district number 4 or district number 5. That's what we're looking for. That's a community of interest. What is not a community of interest is Al Smith wants to run for city council and has a community as a committee, and his committee puts together a statement that says we think that the best way to get Al Smith elected is to draw the district this way. That's not a community of interest. That is a strictly political interest, and we cannot take that into consideration. I do want to say something about the Voting Rights Act, because if a Latino community in Sacramento or anywhere else thinks that they would like to be placed together in a district so that they can have an influence on the election of a person in that district, or in influencing that member of the Board of Supervisors after that person is elected, that's a legitimate community of interest. Ethnic considerations are a community of interest. Political considerations are not. But the Voting Rights Act was created, and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act exists so that ethnic communities, we call them protected classes, Latino communities, African American communities, Asian American communities, or Native American communities, if they feel that they're being discriminated against in a process, they use the Voting Rights Act to challenge that process. That's what the Voting Rights Act is all about.
So it sounds like it can be a really fine line. And so our goal is to make sure that when decisions that are being made, that we follow those federal rules first, then we follow the state rules to make sure that we're not doing that. And then also, that's where public participation, especially during our hearings, when we have the draft maps, if there is any concern of that happening, that would be an appropriate place to make sure that the Board of Supervisors know your thoughts. Okay, good question. Wow. Okay, Clerk of the Board, anyone else in the phone queue?
There are no more calls waiting in the phone queue at this
Okay.
time.
I'm excited. We had 2 calls. That's the most out of any meeting, so that's very exciting. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move to the Zoom Q&A feature, and we will start with a question that I think was in here since almost the beginning. Hi, Doug. If us growers down here in Ileton want to keep growing our crop, can we define our neighborhood by the growers down here? Are we an entity?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Agriculture is a community of interest. Rice growers are a community of interest. Grape growers are a community of interest. So if there's an agricultural interest in part of the county, I think I know where it would be located, but tell us where you are, who you are, what your community looks like. We know where Ileton is, and it's kind of hard not to draw Ileton into one district. But if you have a comment as to where you think your district should go, and what other parts of the county are compatible with that community, please tell us.
Yeah, economic interest, that's right. All right, thank you. All right, have another question here. On this one, I want to give a shout out. Zoe, who is 10, asks about their soccer club being a community of interest.
Yes, soccer clubs are a community of interest. I'm thinking right down the street here, the Franklin community has a very large soccer complex. And a lot of families get together every week and they go to that facility and they practice or they play games. All of those families that use that facility are a community and they have an interest, which is the game of soccer and probably the upkeep of that particular facility.
Right.
So yeah, they should go to their city council and their county board of supervisors and say, this is important to us. So here we are, here's where we all live. We would like to be included together so that we can tell our city council person or our county board of supervisors member what needs to be done here at the Franklin complex. That's a community of interest.
Zoe, we'd love for you to come down to the board meetings in November. That would be great.
Did you say she was 10?
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
that is impressive. All right, thank you, Zoe. Okay, so another just kind of a technical question to just make sure we cover. There was a question regarding creating a login to view district maps. And so, Doug, can you just kind of reiterate the different tools we have and also just clarifying the one does require a login, but not all of them do?
Yeah, the Maptitude for Redistricting online application requires a login. Only because when the company that produces that puts together a report to the county as to who has put in something, it will be noted. And you also have opportunities to comment, to write comments about what your districts are that you draw in there. So it's not for identification purposes. It's for the purposes of the company that runs that particular application. District R is much easier to use, and we encourage folks to use that. It's the paintbrush tool, and there are sections of that where you can actually describe, and if you look on on the county's website, you will see some folks have actually described what they've drawn using the paintbrush tool called District R. And that is, once you hit the save button on that application, it goes again to the company that runs it, and then they send it back to us so that, and they post it on Sacramento County's website so everybody can look at it.
Great.
Does that answer the question?
Great. Yeah. I think there was just confusion regarding the login requirement. So it's just that one, but everything else you don't need the login. Okay, great. A question that has come up actually quite a bit, and I know Doug was talking about it earlier before the meeting started. So, Doug, how is the inmate population factored into population when drawing the district lines?
The state of California passed a law several years ago that required the Department of Corrections, which runs, I forget how many prisons we have in California, but they were required to identify each one of the inmates and where that inmate came from prior to being incarcerated. And they did that in order to reassign the people who are incarcerated in our federal, in our state institutions back to the community that they came from. So, using a Sacramento County example, Folsom has 2 prisons. There are several thousand inmates in each one of those prisons. Each one of those inmates has been assigned back to the neighborhood that they came from. So when you look at, you won't see it in the data, but when you click on a block in Los Angeles where somebody came to Folsom Prison from, that person will be counted down there. When you click on a block in Folsom that contains Folsom Prison, you will see 0. There will be no people there for the purposes of redistricting. So we know there's people there, but the law required them to be reallocated back to the communities where they came from.
That wasn't the way it always was, right, Doug? It wasn't
Sorry?
always that way, because we used that previous redistricting going back to
Nope.
91, where you were able to count the entire population.
10 years ago, Lassen County gets to count within their county the inmates in Susanville Prison. And Folsom, 10 years ago, counted all the people that were incarcerated in Folsom Prison as part of their city and part of our county. Now, you can't do that anymore because the state legislature passed a law that said those people have all been reassigned.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to note, too, I think that came after the redistricting 10 years ago. I think there was I've heard comments that concern that, they just passed it just now to change the kind of rules on us. But the fact of the matter is this was years ago when they decided to make that decision.
That's
right?
correct. My recollection, it was 2014, but don't quote me on that.
And I would just note, if you look at the estimated numbers, and that number, I think, was like 6,000 or 6,500 back in 2011 when we used that, and it was counted in District 4, which that's where Folsom Prison, is physically located. And so, but that number gets backed out of the 2020 calculation. So, and it may lend itself to some of the shortfalls, I guess, in that particular supervisor's district.
Right. It was a little lower before, and now, it might be even lower. That's a good point. Even with some of that growth south of 50. Okay, great. Another question we have is, how many districts are there? And does that change with population growth, or do the districts just get bigger?
The districts get smaller or bigger based on the population considerations. There are 5 supervisor districts in the county of Sacramento, and there will be 5 that we are going to redraw.
And that's set by county charter.
Yes, it's by the charter.
Yeah, so the number of districts will stay the same. It's just those boundaries and the populations will change. Okay, good. And I've gotten that question before too, so that's a great question. Okay, question for the supervisor. Why do you feel it might be important to keep a community together? And what might be my motivation to submit a comment defining my community?
Well, I think to the first part of the question, keeping a community together, I think it's been touched upon by, I think, everyone here at the dais in one way or the other this evening. And that's representation on matters, certainly at the county level, as we talk about county supervisorial district boundaries, but decisions that are made not only relative to allocation of resources, relates to oftentimes, depending upon if you are within the unincorporated or incorporated areas, it relates to policy matters, it relates to, I think, the interests, the communities of interest that would be represented by a member or members of the Board of Supervisors on decisions that affect that community and maybe a host of communities, if not the entirety of the county. So I think it's important for any number of reasons, and I think it's been emphasized here this evening that those communities of interest can be very distinctive in the way they're characterized, and everything from a soccer club to a business district to a neighborhood made up of cultural backgrounds or of language. It can be a variety of things, including physical boundaries of school districts and park districts and cities and so forth. So I think it's very important, and I would encourage the commenter or anyone else, as has been said here by Courtney and others, to look at the resources and tools that are available, submit your suggestion, and I think with the knowledge that as we consider this, the 5 current members of the Board of Supervisors, that those communities of interest and their characterization is going to be a foundational piece for decisions that are made relative to those boundaries, which then are in place for 10 years. And so I think it's very, very important.
Right, 10 years, that's true, that's a long time. And while, we have obviously, say, if you're in the city of Elk Grove, yes, there's going to be a lot of city services, which is why we encourage you to make sure you also participate in your city redistricting, especially when it comes to municipal services. But there are things that the county, works on in terms of obviously in regards to homeless and public health services, which are obviously really huge right now. So all those things, different level services depend on where you live, as the supervisor mentioned, but all cities and counties working together to provide the most optimal services to the constituents as possible.
And Courtney, since you mentioned the city and our process, just for the viewers and those that are present, we are working on an RFP to bring in a consultant to assist us with mapping and outreach. We plan to begin that work before the end of the year and complete it by springtime. I know that the supervisors have a different timeline given when the primary takes place. Right. And so, this is more expedited, but we plan to have the work completed by springtime.
Great.
And it will be much the same and a lot of public engagement because the city did grow and those council districts will change.
Yeah. Great. So we could check back on your website for the most updated info?
Absolutely.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Another question. These are great questions. Let's see here. This actually might be a good question for everyone. If you receive no input from the community, what resources do you have in redistricting? And does it all depend on community interaction?
I'll just say that luckily that's not a problem because we already have had some community input. You can read it all on the Sac County Redistricting website and look at some of the maps that have been drawn. But if there were none, I guess we could start from scratch and simply draw some districts that conform to the laws as I've described them, and then the supervisors can tell me whether that's something that's doable or it's something that is completely ridiculous, and we'll have to start again. So we have some time to get this done, and we have received community input, and I'm sure we will receive more.
Supervisor, I would imagine that'd make your job even more difficult if we didn't have that community input.
Well, I think it goes back to, I'm glad that was a hypothetical versus, a reality, but it's just very important. I mean, the outreach has been done thus far, including this evening's workshop, is important to the process for not only deciding the district divisions from which elected representatives who make a variety of decisions, both big and small, for the people of this county. And so I think it's really important to, as much as possible, to hear from folks, recognizing that we live in a busy time, a busy world, and that even with all the various lines of ways of communicating, it can still be challenging. But I think that not only the process, but the decisions by the Board of Supervisors, but at any level, are better informed, and certainly I think reflect the value that comes with public input. And so, again, I think the whole purpose this evening, one, is to afford the opportunity in this setting, but also make folks aware of the opportunity, and to encourage people to participate, because in representative government, obviously, those of us like Mayor Singh and myself and others are elected to make decisions on behalf of the constituencies that we represent. And as I said, those include decisions about our tax dollars, about the framework for delivery of services and programs for people from all walks of life, of all ages, and whether you're 10 years old or you're 100 years old. The interface, certainly at the county level, in one way, directly or indirectly, affects people's lives. And there's 1,600,000, and I don't know what the exact number is, we're going to know that here in a few days, but people in Sacramento County, and we are one of the most diverse counties in the nation. We're blessed with the opportunity for folks to have educational choices, to have housing choices, to have choices about what neighborhood, what their community of interest is, to participate in a variety of activities, and to hopefully excel and succeed in their walks of life. And so, again, this is important. It may seem like it's less important in some things, but it is a factor by which folks are then given the opportunity at election time to determine who represents them on a host of matters that do affect both directly and indirectly their lives and lives of county residents throughout the community in which we live. So I can't stress enough how important it is, certainly on this matter, but on other matters, to participate. And I would just say that I think that this is not just about listening, but it's taking into consideration seriously those things that we hear, and hopefully applying them in our decision that is ultimately to be made here in the next couple of months.
Right, all about representation. Okay, I do have one last question for the mayor. Glad to see you here supporting this effort. Yes, we all agree with that. Why do you believe it is important for residents of the county to be involved in the redistricting process?
Well, I'm a strong proponent for transparency and public engagement, and so that's only made more strong and evident when the community participates. When you look at this map, and you look not only how big District 5 is, but the fact, that Supervisor Natoli mentioned, it touches every district. Those communities that are bordering all of those districts, they must participate, because this is where our values will be represented, the schools, the cities, the demographics, all of those things that we've identified as communities of interest. So being involved in the process is critical. So not only in this, in the process for redistricting at the county level, but I also encourage everyone at the city level as well. I'm keeping those communities intact, and who will be your representative matters. You look at those, I'm looking at this map, and there's a number of ways that I would play with those colors to make adjustments on what I think are communities of interest, but that may not be what the residents believe. Mm-hmm. And so rather than just have it dictated from the electeds out, this is your responsibility to share back with your elected bodies where you want to be represented.
Great, that's a great point. And yeah, that's where, like you said, we all kind of have ideas in minds, especially with what we know, but we might not be thinking about a certain community. So it's important to speak up. And I think kind of going back to the District 2 workshop we had, where we talked about, possibly big changes, especially if you're on kind of the border of some of those boundaries, that you really might see some big changes. So it's important to watch, and then when the hearings start in November, to watch that as well, to make sure that either you're not being intentionally split or you're where you want to be.
And it's about accountability. Oh, sorry. This is how we hold our electeds accountable. As someone who's been on the other side, you know, we want to make sure that there's no political influences on these district boundaries. And the best way to ensure that is to show up and have a seat at the table and raise your voice.
Yeah, I would just kind of piggyback on that, because people can participate in real time. When our hearings, again, those hearings that have been noted here, will have presentations regarding maps and all the various input, but those are the actual deliberations regarding the maps and the communities of interest. And so I guess I would say to folks, you submit what you choose to submit, but I would also encourage you on the dates, and I think you maybe can go through those this evening on what once again, but if you, not just to be an observer, but to participate, again, in real time as we are talking as a board, hearing from community members who may not have, or may not have already submitted. And I think that is, again, the process as we get to the decision. So I think good points that Mayor Singh, Alan made, but Courtney as well. It's something we're going to build on, but it doesn't just end with, you can with your submittal if that's what you choose to do. But there's a chance to, again, reemphasize and again reemphasize as we consider those maps if you think that something's being missed or left out, or you would calculate it differently based upon what ultimately Doug and his group brings forward to the board.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yes, we will go over those additional opportunities in a moment. I'll just do one last check to see if anyone here wants to make any last-minute comments or have any questions. Okay, great. I will check with the clerk of the board to see if we have any more callers. So excited we had 2. Okay.
This is Darrell with the clerk of the board, and there are no more callers in queue to make public comment.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And then it looks like we went through all of the Zoom Q&A questions as well. So wonderful and great questions, great discussions. And as Supervisor Natoli mentioned, this is one part of it, to get your communities of interest in now. But there's also going to be a very important part to watch the actual hearings when they take place. So we are encouraging folks to get in their community of interest testimony or their proposed maps by October 15th so that our demographers can actually start working on getting those draft maps together from the public comments so they can present it to the supervisors on November 2nd. Then on November 2nd, there will be an opportunity for the public to comment and for the board to deliberate on what has been presented in front of them. Also at that time is when you'll give an overview of the public comments submitted so far. Then based on those public comments, it's going to go back to our consultants at NDC to make any changes based on the public comment or recommendations from the supervisors. So we'll have 2 dates for additional public comments and review. November 16th, we have a meeting in the evening, and then November 17th, we have a meeting in the afternoon. It's at the board chambers, but you could still provide a public comment and testimony by phone. And then after that, we'll get the final maps ready for the board to vote on in December. So by December 7th, we're hoping to have everything wrapped up. So there is those opportunities in November. We're encouraging you to watch this effort, but also as you go through either school districts or cities or even your water district meetings, watch those public hearings as well, because that's where the final decisions will be made. It's also important to note that we will be posting this meeting to our website tomorrow. Our wonderful Department of Technology team does a great job so that all of our district workshops will be posted online and available to share or to review at any time. We have received, it always seems like there's something new we learn at every workshop, so the public comments have really been valuable. I know I've learned a lot just over the past 2 months, so I really appreciate everyone, the clerk of the board, Department of Technology, City of Elk Grove, and the County Executive Office working on this important subject. Do we have any closing remarks from the mayor and the supervisor?
I just want to thank everyone that participated in this process, and thank you Supervisor Natoli and Courtney and the team. This is important work. And so I just urge everyone to stay engaged, be heard, and be represented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I I would echo the thanks and again thank the mayor and the city and all of the contributors to making sure that the meeting and workshop happened this evening. And again, thank you, Courtney, for your leadership, and again, all the folks, including the clerk of the board and technology team. And as can't be said enough, but to emphasize, this is important, and I would hope that folks would take the opportunity that's available to submit their input, and I trust it will be not only valuable, but it'll be, I think, informative and helpful for all of us as we proceed over the next several weeks and ultimately culminate with the decision regarding the districts. And again, those decisions will be in place for 10 years, so they have a lasting effect and impact. And again, I'm hopeful we'll hear from folks, and I was glad we got a couple of callers and our commenters, and thank all of them, and certainly those that were in person here this evening, whether they spoke or not. So thanks again, and everyone have a safe drive home, and hopefully we'll see some of you back on November the 2nd, 16th, and 17th.
That's right. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Zoe. I think we have a future poll worker with Zoe, so she's raised the bar, yeah. I wasn't into redistricting at 10. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. Good night.